Hello everyone, my name is Casey. I'm a member at the SmartCopilot Configuration Garage as well as the SmartCopilot community. You can reach me on Discord. I'm under the alias Zone. So basically what I'm going to do here is make a simple tutorial on how to edit and create a simple SmartCopilot configuration or provide better understanding of what is to be required to make a specific SmartCopilot configuration for any valid aircraft. Okay, so to start off here, we have a template file that's already been downloaded and is for the stock 172 for X-Plane. This template file or actual SmartCopilot configuration can be downloaded from smartcopilot.com and is found in the configuration section. These are very useful. If you're starting off, it helps you get a complete understanding of how these specific configuration files function. Now, I'm going to use this again as a template. I've already stripped it a little bit to help you better understand how it functions. Now at the top here of this configuration file that's already been created, we have some null values. These are hashtags or number signs. They're good for text or disabling specific data refs or said commands. Pretty straightforward. On this next section here, we have in brackets triggers. These are for data refs only. There's more information on that in the development section of SmartCopilot. I don't want to go into complete details on that, but for time's sake, I'm just going to simply say that this is going to exist in almost every SmartCopilot configuration, and this is a perfect spot to start off on. So we have in brackets triggers. That basically just means data refs and data refs only. And as you can see here, I've already worded electrical and doors. We are going to use both of these as the tutorial example. Now I already have the data ref tools installed in X-Plane. You can find those in usual places. Simple Google will allow you to find them. Now what we're going to do is we are going to map just basic functionality. So let's say you're trying to create your own configuration file and you want to start from scratch. Now, what is the most basic necessity in an aircraft? Well, the battery. And if you see here, I'll zoom in, we have gen, battery, and we have left and right gens as well as a battery switch. And there's also emergency. So this will toggle up and it'll toggle down as well as in the center. Anywho, so we want to map this said switch. In normal circumstances, you could essentially create a configuration file and forget to map something out. So for simplicity, we're going to start simple and start with just one simple switch. So again, we're looking for the basic necessities, obviously aircraft power. We want that switch to sync up between the pilot and co-pilot. Now what we're doing is we're using this data ref tool to sniff out the specific data ref that is driving this specific switch. Now, how do we make this very simple? Well, if you see here on the bottom, I have these specifically highlighted. This has to do with ascending, descending, alphabetical. Basically, just make sure you have this in its current state. This last one is the most important, so you don't get confused. Make sure that this says and it is highlighted in green. That stands for data ref. This other one over here is for commands. That'll be another tutorial for another day. Basically, we're just wanting to sniff out data refs. So what I'm going to do here is we have a little text box. This doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to be very specific with keywords. Those of you that understand search engines, you'll know what I'm talking about. So instead of typing, like, say, bat as in battery, you could search under electrical. You could also search under, say, switch. But I already know the value, so what I'm going to do is type in BAT, B-A-T-T. I could make this even smaller, but I want to shorten my results here. Now I already know which value I want to specifically use and which value is going to specifically be best for this aircraft. A lot of, for example, here is a command. This is specific to this aircraft. Obviously we want to try and avoid those, unless of course we can't get something to sync. So to start off, we really want to use sim-based commands. So if you see here, all these say sim something, and those are what we want to use. And I've already defined what I'm searching for, battery. So now that I have this in here, as you can see, all of these are white, which means nothing, no data ref has been triggered for any one of these specific values, or is any of these values are not changing currently, or yes, yeah. So what I'm going to basically just do here is I'm going to leave that the way it is, and I'm going to press this button. Now, as you can see, it has changed some white text to blue text. Now, if I leave this switch up, basically you can see that these said values are constantly changing. Now, to basically put this in layman's terms, obviously we have voltage indicated, voltage actual. These values basically are driving like gauges. And we don't need to necessarily sync every needle. For example, here we have DC voltage. If you were to switch this switch, it's going to switch it for your Copilot, and essentially you're practically going to have about the same voltage when you connect, because you basically all have to start with the same cold and dark, and basically your battery voltage is going to match the moment you connect and both hit the battery switch. So in some cases, syncing up all these dials and gauges, they're not relatively worth it, and it's just basically a waste of network traffic. So these values that are lit up in blue and constantly changing, I'm not too worried about that. That's not related to what I want to do. However, what I do want is the actual binary on and off value for this switch. Now, as you can see, I switched it off. Everything went back to white, or is going back to white. Obviously, because the battery is no longer on, the gauges are no longer trying to output any information. It's basically dead. If I turn this on again, you can see that there is a value here that says cockpit electrical battery on, and it just changed from a 1 to a 0 and then disappeared as being a activated data ref. So to make this very simple, you go up there, you're going to find the data ref that you want. You're going to click on it until you get a text box. Control A to select it all. Do a Control Charlie for a copy. Go to your configuration file, Control V, and paste. Now we have the said data ref for the battery switch, for just one battery switch. Now there might be multiple battery switches depending on aircraft, so just keep that in mind. That information will be coming here very shortly. So there's only one battery switch for this aircraft, and we just want to define this as something that syncs on and off. So to make this very simple, that is all that you have to do. Now if I save and share this configuration file with my said Copilot, the moment I trip the battery switch, it will sync up for my Copilot as well. Now let's do another one here. So I am going to now type in GPU, stands for ground power unit, and as you can see here I have my options menu open, and I have the ability to click ground power unit as well as main door, static elements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this and I'm going to sniff out the ground power unit. Now as you can see, I have basically triggered that data ref. It went on and it's now disappearing. And we also have one here that says GPU underscore amps. Again, that's mainly for a gauge, like a needle, and or basically just charging your generalized battery. We don't need to sync up that specific data ref, but what we do want to sync up is the actual ground power unit on and off. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go up there, highlight it, Control A, Control C, Control V, and now we have defined our ground power unit. I would save the file, share my configuration, and test to make sure that it works. These are set values, I know, that are actual, so these ones definitely 100% function. So again, you can use these as a template. Now we're going to move on to something a little more complex. So let's map our doors. So I'm going to go back to search and I'm going to type in door. Now, because there's multiple doors, we can't just have a simple single data ref that drives the doors, because, well, obviously if it's just one command, do you want all the doors opening all at once? Obviously not. So what we're going to do here is we're going to sniff out a specific door, and I will demonstrate how to understand this information. And this is the more complex level of understanding. This took me a little while to comprehend at first, but once you get the generalized idea, it becomes pretty straightforward. Okay, so now we're here at the main cabin door, and I have obviously a click box here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click it. Now we obviously have multiple data refs yet again that are being driven, but we only want to use one specifically. We also have the menu down here, which basically is doing the same thing. When you trigger this, it's going to trigger your menu, which it does, but that is hard-coded, and that has, you don't need to program that specifically. So we're just looking for that data ref. So which door is it that we want to use? So we don't need to do flight model, and we don't need to sync our sounds, because if we sync our sounds, essentially we're just wasting network, because the moment you go and open this door, your game is going to send the sound to your game, and the moment that your Copilot has a synced door, they're going to hear the sound on their end, if that makes any sense. So let's just say for a second that we obviously know we don't need to sync up the sounds, and we're basically left with two values here. This one says flight model, and then this one says cockpit. Now, I do believe you could use either or, but for this sake, I'm going to use the cockpit 2 switches door open. So again, we're going to highlight that, Control A, Control C, and Control V. Now we have a door open. Now back to what I was saying, multiple doors. This will function, but it will only function for the said first door. And this being the first door, if I was to save this, this door will function with this specific string. However, we want more than one door, and we need to define this specific door. Now, how we are going to do that is we are going to go back to the data ref tool here. We've already verified which one we want to use. And if you see here, there is in brackets the number 10, and then equals 0, 0, 0, 0. Basically, essentially, there's 10 zeros in this specific data ref. And any one of these zeros can change from a 0 to a 1, defining it as basically pushed, on or off. So for most people, initially when I did this, I figured that this was the correct way of doing said values. However, I was wrong. To make this specific door function, this is the command that we want to use. Now, 0 is always a 1 when it comes to these bracketed float values. And here is why. If you look at this specific string again, where it says 10 in brackets and then equals, the moment I press this button, the first 0 changes to a 1. Then if I press it again, it changes again. And back to a 1, back to a 0, back to a 1, back to a 0. So now I've defined that this door indefinitely is the first digit in the series, and the first digit again being 0. So now I want to map the second door. Now if I go to click on this, as you can see, it triggers the same data refs, all three for that matter, but again, we are not going to sync up the sound. We don't need to do open ratio. We just need to do a simple on or off. So as you can see here, this is now technically the third value in the string of code. So what we're going to do is we are going to duplicate this this many times, because I know exactly how many there are, and we're going to make this very simple. Now we have two doors that are mapped. But what about these ones? Well, these are the next series in question, and we need to define these as well. So for each line of code here, they all still use the equals 0 command, or binary on or off. So how you see everything structured here is basically how you will structure your configuration. Now, again, let's find these last two, and then we will conclude this tutorial. So we've already defined that. We have two baggage doors here, and they are going to be at the front of the aircraft. And as you can see here, I'm triggering another data ref, and this value happens to be 1. And without even clicking the next one, that is the set value. So hopefully this gives you a better understanding of how to create your configuration file. If you have any questions, feel free to find me on Discord.